In this video, we're going to show you how to pull down changes from GitHub inside IntelliJ. So what we're going to do is make a change to a file in GitHub and then update our local repository in IntelliJ to pull down those changes. Now, I mentioned earlier in this course in other sections that it's not ideal to make changes directly on GitHub, and in the real world scenario, that would be something that wouldn't happen very often at all. Instead, what usually would happen is that some team or another team member would contribute the change on GitHub by pushing their local repository changes up onto GitHub. And you saw in the previous video, we went through and had a look at the commit history, and we can see that there was a number of different people who have committed to this particular project that we happen to have selected and cloned. So essentially, some other team member will pull down the changes that have been made by that other user from GitHub to this local repository. So if we were a team member and we know that someone else has made a change, then we want to do that. We want to get those changes into our version of the code. Now, there are different types of scenarios based on company workflows and team collaboration, etc. But this scenario is quite a common one and something that would be used on a very frequent basis. All right, so let's go to GitHub. We're going to simulate this by making a change directly on GitHub and just assume that someone else has made that change. I'm going to go back to GitHub. I'm going to go into our Python forked project. And let's just literally select any file. It doesn't really matter which one. I'm going to click on this one, count_characters.py. And I'm going to come over here and click on the edit this file. And you can see this is some sort of, obviously a scene from a particular play or something of that sort. So I'm going to go right down to the bottom so as to not interfere with any of the code there. Print value, right down the bottom here. Let's just print something out. Print. Adding my 2 cents here. All right, very simple change. And commit changes, well, we need to, because we're going to commit to a repository, in this case the remote repository, we need a commit message. I'm just going to put added message to indicate my opinion. You can see it's committing directly to the master branch, which is what we want. We don't want to create new branches. We'll be looking at that in a future video in this section of the course. Click on commit changes now to commit our little one-line change. And you can see, interestingly enough now, we've got 3 contributors here. These other 2 people who've contributed to it before, and obviously us as well now. This is our account, myself, Tim Bachowka. So I'll go back now to Python, the main part of the repository. You can see this particular case has been a staggering 174 commits, but if we click on that, we should see that the very latest commit in this case is added message to indicate my opinion, which is exactly what we wanted to do so that we can actually simulate this. And again, remembering we've forked this project into our own account, or in this case, my own account, so we're not affecting anyone else here. All right, so let's go back to IntelliJ. Because what we need to do now is we now need to get those changes that have been made on the remote repository. Again, we're simulating that another developer was making a change. We want to get all the changes that have been made into this project. We can start. One option is to click on VCS, Update Project, and there's a shortcut to the right-hand side there. Click on that, and we get this option that comes up. Now, the option you want to choose here is Merge and Stash. Now, merge means we're going to merge the changes from the remote repository, in this case, into our local repository. Now, there's these other options to do with rebase and branch default. We won't be talking about those here now because they're more advanced concepts. So we'll leave those out. And using shelf over here, we won't be using either, because shelf is actually something that's part of IntelliJ IDEA internal operation, so it's not reused very often. What Stash does, though, is quite interesting. What will happen is any local changes that you've made will be stashed away and put to one side and then merged back after the merge from the remote repository has completed. So it's a way of ensuring that that your changes aren't lost or overridden. They're actually applied after the merges happen. So let's actually simulate that. Let's go back and do that. Now we know that coming back here to the browser, the change that we looked at and made to was this count_character.py. So that's the file that we actually modified. So let's go back to IntelliJ again. Before we do this, proceed, and we'll open that file, the count_characters.py. It's making sure it is that file. get count million characters.py, character.py. Right. Now let's make a change here as well. Let's put something like, maybe at the top I'm going to print, just do something really simple. I'm going to add a comment. Because what we're trying to simulate, and I'll get rid of the second one there, so we've got the code working again. So we're trying to simulate a local change to the repository and what happens when we merge. So in this case, we've got a change that hasn't been committed to the repository yet. So it's a change that is to be added at some future point, but we haven't actually committed that yet. So we're going to do the merge first. So VCS update project, making sure that I select merge and stash. And as I've shown you previously, IntelliJ enables you to not have to ask this or bring this dialog up each time. If you're happy that this is going to be the option you're going to use each time, you can click on that checkbox. I normally like to leave that off so that I see these options each time. So now what should happen is that our change will be sort of stored away. So in other words, that command will be deleted. The change from the remote repository should come down and be added. And then when it's finished, that IntelliJ should come back again and apply this change as Tim's comment at the top. So let's actually run this and see if it works. You can see down the bottom, stashing changes, unstashing changes. You may have caught a glimpse of that happening. And if I scroll up, you can see Tim's comment is still there. The file's still in blue, which indicates there is a change to be made. But if you scroll right down to the bottom of this file, we should hopefully see we've got our comment adding my 2 cents here. So we've got the best of both worlds here. We've got our local changes preserved, but also the remote changes have come from GitHub and have been pulled into this project from GitHub. And we've still got the option there to go ahead with that change if we decide to. And in this case, if I don't want to do that, I could just right click Git, select Git, and click on Revert. Revert still keeps the change from the remote repository because that's now the current repository, the latest commit, but it's now removed our change because we hadn't committed that anywhere. And again, as before, we could have clicked on console to see what's happened in the files that were changed. And you can also see here the git stash, saving the uncommitted changes, and then the stashing, popping them again, and making sure that those changes weren't lost effectively. And then checking out the head at the end again because that was the latest version. So it's pretty cool how we can do all that. And again, if we look up here, scroll up to the top, added message to indicate my opinion. That's the latest commit history. All right, so that's one way to achieve a pull, but there is actually another way, and that's to come up here with the VCS menu, VCS Git and pull. And this gives you a few other options here. We've got a default strategy, a different strategy to employ. We won't be talking about those because they're more an advanced thing, and if you really want to know some of the more advanced strategies that are rarely used, but if you do want to know that, check out BibHash's course. He goes into a lot of detail about all the advanced stuff. You don't need that most of the time. We've got these other options here which you probably won't use. Like if you hover over them, you can actually see what they're about. When you're merging, if you wanted to not commit, you could just choose that option. You could add extra log information. And some of these, again, you need to know what they are, squashing and what fast forward actually means, which is more advanced features. You probably won't need to use any of those at this point in time. But essentially, this is just another way of actually pulling a change through, and you'll be seeing that in later videos in this section. But let's just quickly test it. Rather than doing that, we'll cancel out of that. Let's make another quick change on the repository, on the remote repository. So we'll go back to the main repository for this particular file. And let's just make a change to another file, the README. Need to edit it first. And let's do something else. Okay, very simple change. The end, commit message, commit the changes. Down the bottom now, you can see the end, that's worked okay. So let's go back to IntelliJ and just have a look at this alternate way of pulling a change. So we can come up here to VCS, Git, pull, and leave everything else as the default and just click on pull. Down the bottom you can see it's pulling changes. It gives us an update as to what's happened, the fact that it's actually pulled this README file. And again, the console gives you an indication of what commands were used there. Important revision to README, so you can see that the commit history has changed. In the local changes, we've still got our default unversioned files there, which I'll leave out. And if we have a look at our README, which we can come back here, double click on that, and go right down the bottom, and there's the file, the comment that we actually added. So that's an alternate way of doing a pull as well. All right, so I'm going to finish the video here now. In the next video, we're going to start talking about branching, what branching is. Again, we did talk about that in the command line section. Then let's go through an example of using branching within IntelliJ starting on the next video.